Good morning. Today we are wrapping up our Cold War Warm Kitchens chapter. Let's start with our key terms. Communism.
An economic system in which property and businesses are owned by the government for the benefit of all citizens.
So communism is when the businesses and property are owned by the government, so everybody can be equal. Capitalism. Naomi? In capitalism, those businesses and property are privately owned. So the theory is, in communism, everybody is treated the same, so we're all good because we're all the same. But in reality, they don't have much. So they're all treated the same, but that same is not good. In capitalism, we can own stuff privately, but the problem is some people own a lot and some people have nothing. The good thing about capitalism is if you have nothing, there is the hope and the chance and the opportunity to be able to get yourself out of that and to be able to own stuff. So there is a chance where in communism, everybody's the same and you're stuck there. In capitalism, you can move up. You can be successful. Superpower. Remember, the superpower were the countries that have the great military and political influence over the rest of the world. People follow them. The two big superpowers during after World War II until 1991 would be United States and the Soviet Union. They were vying over who was the biggest and bestest superpower. We have capitalism. Soviet Union had communism. So it was a battle between the two, wanting our own economic system to spread throughout the world and stopping the other one. A veteran, remember, is the person who was in the military, especially people who fought in the war. The suburb are the areas right outside of the city. We are a suburb of Minneapolis. And the Vietnam War was fought because communism and capitalism were vying against each other. We had North Vietnam, that was communist. The Soviet Union was siding with them. And we were siding with South Vietnam because they were non-communist. So let's look at what we are going to read today. We were in the section on the Cold War at home. We read some of it. And we're going to finish with that section, and then we're going to read about the Cold War overseas. So, page 375. We started yesterday talking about Betty Crocker. And we're going to learn a little bit more about her. Is Betty Crocker a real person? No. She was made up by General Mills to help out, to help be that influence. She would be like an influencer of today's world. She helped the housewives to be able to cook better and easier and more efficiently. So, cookbooks and convenience foods. In 1950, General Mills published a new cookbook that set the foundation for the company's post-war success. Betty Crocker's picture cookbook was unlike any cookbook ever written before. It included hundreds of photographs that explained step by step how to make everything from lemon chiffon cake to chicken a la king. It told housewives that cooking was the age-old way to express love and concern for their family's welfare. Plus, it was fun and easy. So it made that cooking easy for people to use. I'm going to try to see if I remember to bring in my mom's Betty Crocker cookbook. She, I think, probably got it when she got married in 1968. So it's pretty old. So I'll see. It's not the exact same as this one, because this one is from 1950, but it is similar. Paisley.
My mom has this really old one that we used to make pancakes.
Uh-huh.
And it's like really old. And so like the paper's ripping and it's kind of
Yep.
brown.
Yeah, I have to be very careful with my mom's because, yeah, the paper is getting old. Betty Crocker's picture cookbook may have introduced Americans to fancy recipes like lemon chiffon cake, but it was the modern cake mix that really changed the way Americans baked. Ready-to-make cakes in eye-catching boxes offered housewives a dessert that did not take hours to make. They could make their families a tasty dessert like the ones illustrated in the picture cookbook without spending as much time in the kitchen. How many of you have made a cake from a box? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's super easy to do. You just open up the cake mix, pour it in a bowl. You add eggs, you add oil, you mix it all up, and you put it in the oven. Super easy. Okay, if you're making a cake from scratch, you need to make sure you have all the different ingredients, the flour, the right kind of flour, the salt, the baking soda or baking powder. If it's chocolate cake, you need the cocoa powder, and you need to be able to mix it all the right way. It takes longer. So much easier to just cut open that bag, dump it in, and you're done. Nolan.
Oh yeah, I did a cake with my dad when I did Cub Scouts, and then I got an award for like.
Did you get a badge for cooking?
Yeah, I made a football cake, and it was the flattest cake, so that I got an award for having the flattest cake.
Gregory?
My cousin made 2 cakes in one day, but she made them from scratch.
Nice. Sometimes those are tastier. Maddie? Very nice. General Mills introduced Betty Crocker cake mixes in 1949. Soon the company had a whole line of easy-to-use baking products that appealed to Americans' desire for home-cooked comfort. Among the most successful was an all-purpose baking mix called Bisquick. Anybody have a big bag or box of Bisquick at home? Yeah, you can make biscuits out of it. You can make pancakes out of it. We like to do the big pancake mix from Costco. So that's, I think it's Krusty's. Yeah. We have Krusty's pancake mix, but my sister uses Bisquick. So it makes it easier. So you just have to scoop out how much of the mix you need. You mix it up and make your pancakes or biscuits or whatever you're making. You don't have to have all the different ingredients that you need to measure. So it's just easier and faster. Gregory?
My dad, because he doesn't like normal pancakes at all, and he doesn't exactly like muffins, but he has blueberry muffin mix, so he turns those into pancakes.
Oh, very good. I like blueberry pancakes. With a box of Bisquick and a few additional ingredients, a post-war housewife could whip up a dinner featuring biscuit burger appetizers, topsy-turvy meat pie, and apple pan dowdy for dessert. Everything about Betty Crocker, from her cookbooks to her baking mixes, was designed to fit into Cold War America's domestic dreams of a cozy home life. Still, the reassuring presence of Betty Crocker could not gloss over the very real dangers of the Cold War world. Cold War couple Ed and Thelma Mahowald. People across the world remembered with horror the atomic bombs that were dropped on Japan in 1945. Fears of nuclear or atomic war grew throughout the 1950s as the United States and the Soviet Union each built up stockpiles of nuclear weapons. In 1961, relations between the two countries were more strained than ever. Would the Soviet Union launch a nuclear attack on the United States? They would do air raid drills like we do lockdown drills and tornado drills and fire drills. They would have air raid drills where they would practice at school what to do in case we got attacked. And the kids knew to hide underneath their desks. We know now that really wouldn't protect them, but it gave them something to do to ease that fear just in case there was an air attack. President John F. Kennedy called on all Americans to prepare for a possible nuclear war. The government instructed Americans to build fallout shelters, underground rooms designed to protect people from the dangerous radioactive dust created by a nuclear blast. Most Minnesotans got through the Cold War without ever setting foot in a fallout shelter. Ed and Thelma Mahowald were among the few who actually built their own. Now, my parents lived out in Milwaukee during this time. Their families did not have fallout shelters, but it is something that some families did do to try to protect themselves. Yes.
So basically an underground bunker.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
The Mahowalds lived in the southern Minnesota town of Farmington. Farmington is down by Lakeville and Shakopee, so close to Valley Fair. So it's not that far from where we are. Like most Minnesotans, they tried not to think too much about the threat of nuclear war. They had other things to worry about. Money was tight, their family was growing, and their home was starting to feel cramped. They needed extra room. In 1961, as the Mahowalds were getting ready to add on to their home, they heard President Kennedy call on all Americans to build fallout shelters. This request got them thinking. They hadn't planned on building a fallout shelter, but now it didn't seem like such a bad idea. They were adding a family room, weren't they? Why not put a shelter beneath it? So it's like Nolan said, the underground bunker. So they, underneath where they're putting their family room, they put another room, the fallout shelter. Ed and Thelma Mahowald built the first fallout shelter in Farmington. It was just because the president asked me to do it, Ed later recalled. The people of Farmington took notice. The city council offered Ed Mahowald the job of Farmington Civil Defense Director, the person who would protect civilian residents during a war. Mahowald accepted the job. He went to meetings with civil defense officials from other towns, and he tested the city's warning siren once a month. So just like we have a tornado siren once a month, they had the air raid siren once a month. He was glad the siren soundings were just for practice. The Mahowalds never did have to use their fallout shelter to protect themselves from nuclear war. Ed used it as a special darkroom where he handled camera film and processed it into photographs. Thelma stored canned vegetables on the shelves in the shelter. At Halloween, their children turned it into a haunted house. Still, the Mahowalds, like other Minnesotans, knew that the world could be a dangerous place. So they knew that it could happen. They just prayed that it never would happen. And thankfully, it did not happen. The Cold War overseas. The Cold War rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union never erupted into an all-out war, but it did play a major role in two military conflicts in Asia. In each of these conflicts, the United States went to the aid of a country threatened by a communist neighbor. So, where were these two places? Who knows their history? Will?
Wait, the two wars?
Yep.
Korea and Vietnam.
Yep, the Korean War and the Vietnam War. So the Korean War, let's read about that. So the Korean War, the first conflict was known as the Korean War. At the end of World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union had agreed to share military control of Korea. The Soviets occupied the northern half of the country and set up a communist government. The Americans occupied the southern half and set up a capitalist government. In 1950, North Korea invaded South Korea, starting a war. The Soviet Union and the communist government of nearby China supported North Korea. The United States and its allies joined the war on the side of South Korea. The fighting ended 3 years later when both sides signed an agreement to stop fighting. Hundreds of thousands of people died in the Korean War, including almost 37,000 Americans. Among the dead were 725 Minnesotans. So we have North Korea and South Korea fighting each other. After 3 years of fighting, they didn't get anywhere. So they signed an agreement to say we're going to stop fighting. Did either side win?
No.
No. There is still a North Korea and a South Korea. So it's still like that to today. Neither side won. They were at an impasse. There is a famous comedy show, a sitcom that was made set during the Korean War. My son likes to watch reruns of it on MeTV. MeTV is a TV channel that does reruns of old shows. Does anybody know what TV show was set during the Korean War? Yeah, but which one is set during the Korean War? It's called MASH.
Oh,
Yeah,
no.
some of us have heard of MASH, but we've never actually watched it. So if you watch the TV show MASH, it was filmed, I don't know, it's a long time ago. Maybe, was it in the 70s? I think it was in the 70s that MASH was first filmed. They do reruns now, but it'll talk about the Korean War times. All right, now the Vietnam War. The second conflict, the Vietnam War, lasted much longer than the Korean War. The Korean War was only 3 years. Vietnam War, remember, starts in 1954 and goes to 1975. Vietnam was a country in Southeast Asia that, like Korea, was split in two. The Vietnam War pitted North against South, just like Korea. Communist forces in North Vietnam wanted to reunite the two countries. The government of South Vietnam did not want to reunite if it meant accepting communism. The United States supported South Vietnam's cause. Beginning in the 1950s, the United States sent money and military experts to give the South Vietnamese advice on how to fight a war. Then in 1965, U.S. troops joined the fight. So the Vietnam War starts in 1954, but we don't join it yet. We just send money, we send help, but we don't send soldiers. Not until 1965. So 11 years of fighting has been going on before we send our soldiers over there. Minnesota Marine Jim Northrup. Jim Northrup was among the first Americans to see combat in Vietnam. He was from the Fond du Lac Reservation in northeastern Minnesota. As an Ojibwe boy, Northrup had grown up hearing stories of Ojibwe warriors. He wanted to honor his family's military tradition. Shortly after graduating from high school, he joined the U.S. Marine Corps. There, he felt he would get the most demanding training possible. As long as I was going to be a warrior, I wanted to be the best, he explained. Northrup arrived in Vietnam in the fall of 1965. He was assigned to a Marine unit called India Company. The Marines of India Company were often on the move. They regularly left their base in search of North Vietnamese fighters. It was dangerous duty. They had to watch out for snipers, enemies hidden with guns, because remember, they're going through the jungle, so there's a lot of places for snipers to hide. And landmines, which are small bombs that explode when triggered by a person or a vehicle. Joseph?
My grandpa was actually in Vietnam War, so like the jungles were really dark, so all they could see. So they know they were going to have to shoot when like they would see flashes from the muzzle, and then since they couldn't see them, since like the enemy couldn't see them, they'd be shooting all over the place, and then the muzzle would light up, so they knew who they would have to shoot.
Think about how scary that is. You don't know that it's super dark because it's a jungle, so the trees are blocking the sunlight getting down. So you can't see well. They're wearing camouflage, and the only way you know where the enemy is you see the flash of light from when they shoot their gun at you. You hope that they don't hit you so you can shoot back because you have an idea of where they are now because you shoot at where that flash of light was. Pretty scary.
Also, when they were throwing a grenade, they had to be careful not to hit one of the tree branches or else it'll bounce right back at them.
Oh, very true. Because being a jungle, there are branches everywhere. So if you're lobbing a grenade over, that is something I never even thought of, that you have to be careful where you're throwing it because if it hits the branch, it's going to bounce back and you don't want the grenade going off where you are. Oh my. Did you just talk with Grandpa about these stories? Or has he told these stories?
He's
told them. Katie?
You know, my great uncle was also in the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he was in like active combat, but I think he has something to do with the Air Force.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of different positions in the military. Some people are on the front line in the jungle, and some people are more behind the scenes. If he's in the Air Force, he might have been on an aircraft carrier and been on a ship instead of being in the jungle. Yep, but I'm sure he still has a lot of stories to tell. So the landmines, every Marine wondered whether he would return to base alive. At first, Northrup didn't worry much about being wounded or killed. He felt bulletproof. But that feeling didn't last long. It went away with each wounded Marine we loaded on a helicopter, he said. So he saw all of his friends getting wounded or killed. And he realized that could easily be me. Most of the American troops who served in Vietnam considered it their duty to defend their country. As time went on, however, many began to wonder what they were actually fighting for. The U.S. government claimed that if South Vietnam fell to North Vietnam, communism would soon spread to other countries and put the United States in more danger. Yet many Americans, including Jim Northrup, began to think that the United States was mixed up in a fighting between neighbors, a fight that would be hard to win. It's not a very good war, Northrup and his buddies told each other, but it's the only one we have. So they have to fight it. This is where the military sent them. So they're going to fight the war because this is where they were sent. But they didn't necessarily agree with it. They thought, you know what? North and South Vietnam should be figuring this out themselves. we shouldn't be trying to figure it out for them. There's a lot of people that felt that way. For the Marines, the tour of duty, or the amount of time spent in a war zone, was 6 months. Before his first tour of duty ended, Jim Northrup enlisted for another. His tour of duty in Vietnam totaled 13 months and ended in late 1966. He felt lucky to have survived. Unlike so many I had seen, I still had all my body parts, he said. I left Vietnam with the right number of legs and arms. Because of all of those landmines, people walking, going on scouting out in the jungle, they could easily step on a landmine because they're buried underground, and they could get a leg blown off, or a grenade could blow an arm off. So a lot of people lost limbs during the Vietnam War. So they were thinking, wow, I'm super lucky that I have both legs and both arms, because a lot of people coming home did not. The Vietnam War continued for more than 8 years after Northrop returned home to Minnesota. It eventually spread into the neighboring countries of Laos and Cambodia. People from those countries fought on one side or the other as well. In 1973, the United States signed a ceasefire, an agreement to stop fighting with North Vietnam. This resulted in the removal of nearly all U.S. forces from Vietnam. The remaining American military and government personnel pulled out in 1975 when the government of South Vietnam collapsed and North Vietnam claimed victory. Millions of soldiers and civilians died during the Vietnam War. About 1,000 of the 58,000 Americans who were killed came from Minnesota. So we pulled out in 1973 because we realized this was a war that we just couldn't win. We'd been there long enough. We got there in 1965, and it's already 1973, and we're losing ground. We're losing soldiers. So we knew we weren't going to win it, and we said, we just can't keep sending our boys in here to die. So we pulled out most of our military, and without our support, South Vietnam really started to crumble, and by 1975, they were overtaken by North Vietnam. The Vietnam War was America's last major military conflict of the Cold War period. In 1991, the government of the Soviet Union collapsed and the country broke into 15 smaller nations, including Russia. So in the last class, we were curious as to what those nations were. Let me read them off. So Soviet Union broke up into Armenia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Estonia, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Latvia, Lithuania, Moldova, Russia, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Ukraine, and Uzbekistan. So when the Soviet Union broke up, that's when Ukraine became its own country. Okay. Yes, Will? Mm-hmm.
Why would they just go to Ukraine then?
Well, do you think that if they have to have a starting point?
Mm-hmm.
So the United States became the big superpower once Soviet Union broke up. Putin was a big high up in the military of Soviet Union, so he remembers what it was like to be a superpower. So now he's the leader of Russia. He wants to bring some of that back to Russia. So they have to have a starting point. He says, you know what, we're going to bring Ukraine back in. And if he brings Ukraine back in, if they are successful in overtaking Ukraine, what do you think he's going to do next?
He's gonna go
He's going to go for some of these other countries that broke off. Yeah, he's going to go for the ones that he can get to start with.
He wants to reestablish.
So why the Ukraine? Because that was the starting point. Okay, but he wants to build Soviet Union back up because he wants Russia to be that superpower that the Soviet Union had been. Do we want that to happen? No, because we don't want the spread of communism. So let's finish our reading real quick. That left the United States as the world's dominant military power. Most Americans and most Minnesotans stopped worrying about the spread of communism and the threat of nuclear war. Other threats would emerge, but the simmering conflict that had dominated American life since World War II was finally over. Leah, Zoe, you had a question?
Yeah. Is Ukraine a communist place or no?
I don't know what their economic system is. I don't believe that they are communist, but I'm not sure that they're capitalist. I would have to look up. There's several different types of economic systems. I would have to look that one up. Okay, so our chapter comprehension page needs to be finished. We are correcting it tomorrow. We have finished all the reading. If you have your chapter comprehension page completely finished, you're going to read on your own right now Voices from the Vietnam War, page 382. So read about from people who were actually in the Vietnam War and read what their experiences were like. So first thing you're going to do is finish chapter comprehension. It is due tomorrow. Please do not come to class with it not finished. Finish working on it, and then you can read the Voices from the Vietnam War. For my friends at home, we hope you are well, and we hope to see you soon.